Hello Malaysians, my name is Professor Dr. Muhammad Tajuddin, and for this video I would like to make some comments on the issue of if JAKIM officers were placed at every department in the government or in the ministries, will this be a good thing or a bad thing for Malaysia? Now, to most non-Muslims, the reaction seems to be very clear that they think that this is a bad thing. Why? Many have voiced the idea that this is not a religious nation, and therefore religion should not interfere in political matters. Now, with regards to this aspect, I have already explained in many of my writings and also in my speeches, whether we like it or not, Malaysia or the Muslims in Malaysia are presented with only two kinds of Islam. One is the Islam that we can see from Parti Islam Malaysia, who hates Perikatan Nasional. We can see their conservatism when they talk about concerts, they talk about swimsuits, and they talk about many things that most of us consider to be very trivial and unimportant, and that it should not be part of policy making. Then we have the other kind of Islam, which is presented by Anwar Ibrahim and the Pakatan Harapan with the unity government, which is more progressive, more liberal in its approach to things. And among the two, the most favored seems to be at the moment is the conservatism of the Parti Islam Malaysia and Perikatan Nasional. Because to most Malays, this is easier to follow, and because the party has many ustaz or cleric, therefore it is very clear to them. Now, most Malays do not really consider the other Islam, which is presented by Anwar Ibrahim, as viable, because they think that how can Islam be taught by people who are non-religious? This is also part of the idea that the institutions of the Mufti does not really seem to support enthusiastically what Anwar has done. Personally, I grew up with the Islam of Anwar Ibrahim, which is an Islam which is open, which is inclusive of all, which has a wider spirituality. This is what I believe. And I found that throughout my life, many Malays do not support this kind of Islam that I actually support. So the Malays are struggling with these two kinds of Islam. Any Malay leader or in any Malay political party, whether UMNO can be something that will become a leader again like they used to be, they will have to deal, whether they like it or not, with the issue of Islam. Islam is already there. Now, many non-Muslims disagree with the idea of Islam intervening in socio-political matters. Many so-called Muslims or Malays who did not support the Islamic reform system or Islamic reform ideas in the 80s are also of that idea. They want a 1960s P. Ramlee Tunku Abdul Rahman Malaysia. Now, I used to support the Islamic reform system or the Islamic reform agenda, and I too did not like the P. Ramlee Tunku Abdul Rahman idea. But now I am more in line with the idea of separating religion and politics. It has taken me 30 years to realize that this is a very, very dangerous combination. However, being realistic, I have looked at the situation with the Malays, the middle class, the upper middle class, those who have money, wealth, and even those who are still struggling. All of them have become conservative Muslims. The Malays in this era of 21st century are different than in 1970. This is a fact that many non-Malays does not seem to understand. Whether there is an Anwar Ibrahim in this world or not, the Malays eventually will come to this level of conservatism. And many blame politicians, but politicians simply pray or take the beliefs of the Malays to their advantage. That's all there is. Because politics is about winning votes, and therefore, whatever win votes, whether it is money, whether it is religion, whether it is race supremacy, that is how our country has been made. Now, this is the reality. You like it or you don't like it, this is the situation. So, that is where we need to look at the issue of the JAKIM officers in a different light. We need to come to terms with the idea that JAKIM is not going anywhere. Who is going to eliminate JAKIM? I think if Anwar Ibrahim were to eliminate JAKIM, he will be out of office by next week. Would UMNO, if they come to power, eliminate JAKIM? I don't think so. What about PAS? Would they eliminate JAKIM? Well, that's a very interesting question because PAS is full of clerics. If they don't like JAKIM, maybe they will eliminate it because they will replace it with their brand of clerics and Islam, which probably will be worse than what other people think that JAKIM is capable of. Now, for me, I think that many Malaysians must understand and come to a reality. The reality is that Islam is here to stay for the next 30 years. The issue of conservatism, it will be here. The choice is simply whether to accept an Islam that is more progressive and looking into the idea of a more expansive, the idea of a more of an Islam that is able to accept many things, and also one that nurtures creative thinking, critical thinking, as opposed to another Islam which does not accept critical thinking, which does not accept inclusiveness, which does not accept progress. So there is only these two. There is no third choice. Now, this may seem cruel, but it is the reality. Do you want to deal with reality or do you want to deal in fantasy? If you want to deal in fantasy, then many people will probably stay out and not come to vote, which then will give the win to the Perikatan Nasional Conservative Extremist brand of Islam. Now, let me give you my perspective of this issue of the JAKIM officers. Now, for me, whether JAKIM exists or not, it's something that I don't really care, or it's not a matter of importance to me. I am a Muslim. I know my responsibility. I don't need somebody else calling themselves JAKIM or any other entity to tell me what is Islam. I can get all my knowledge from the internet, and I have my spiritual practice. And this is what Islam is supposed to be. There is supposed to be no priesthood in Islam, and every Muslim must understand knowledge of spirituality within their own personal capability. Okay, now let's go back to this JAKIM issue of putting in clerics or their officers in the department. So, many people think that this is a dangerous thing to do. They think that, first of all, these officers will then dictate, saying you can do this or you cannot do this. Now, many people have never dealt with the clerics. I have dealt with clerics in discussions, in some policy making decisions. Clerics are ustaz. They are not muftis. Muftis are the only one given the legal power. So the officers here that will be placed are all religious clerics. They do not have the legal power to say, we can do this or the policy should be that. It is not. So they are there in a sense that they will provide some sort of perspective within the aspect of Islam. And this is the main reason that they are there. So the first thing I want to say is that this clerics is not going to determine whether something is right or something is wrong, something is halal or something is haram. They provide inputs. And so this is something that is extremely important to understand. Now, secondly, we have to live with JAKIM, and these JAKIM officers or clerics are the ones that will mold the Muslim mind through the Friday sermon and through their ceramah at mosque. My problem with these people is that their thinking is very narrow-minded. They don't have the multidisciplinary aspect to make some kind of a good decision that is good for Malaysia, good for all people, good for all humanity, good for the planet and everything. I don't believe they are capable. So what better way for them to learn is by putting them in the various ministries. Let's say you have an ustaz, several of them in different departments in the Ministry of Science. Do you think all of these ustaz are very good at science? Of course not. And so they are there. Then they will learn about the issues and problem of science rather than just being stuck only to their own religious readings and religious thinking. I have read many sermons, and I cannot detect any of these sermon writers understanding science, whether in principles, details, or even in an inspiration manner, or in an inspiring manner. So it is very good for them to be exposed, to be in the Ministry of Economy, to be in the Ministry of Transport, to be with other people. Imagine if they are in the JAKIM, they will be all with Malays and Muslim. But in the ministry, with the politicians, they will have to serve people from GPS, people from GRS, people from all different faiths and different races. Now, isn't that a good thing? For me, it is a very positive thing for them to be placed in this various department, so that they can widen their thinking through their different exposure. Then there is the element of, if they are part of the decision-making process, meaning they give their input, and then it is being discussed, they are not dictating. They will never dictate. Because if they dictate, then it's pointless. Okay? Why should we have, if they dictate, then it means JAKIM dictates everything. No, JAKIM does not dictate everything. I don't listen to most clerics. Even if a mufti says something, I would still base on my thinking, because I know from God that my actions are my own alone. I don't need an intermediary between myself and God. So this is how the input from the clerics are merely inputs, as I said. And so when these people or these religious officers from JAKIM become part of the decision-making process, then if there is any toxic narrative from people like Parti Islam Malaysia or Perikatan Nasional in general, or any very, very ignorant social media influencers, then these people can actually be the front or be on the front line to explain in the social media as well as in the media what actually is the position of Islam with related to this misinformation or disinformation, or purposely something that is purely ignorant in relation to presenting information to the public. So they, in terms, become a frontliners in the combat against religious extremism that tries to interpret policies towards creating chaos in the country. Now, finally, one of the scenarios that we can think of, if we do not like, or Malaysians do not like what Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim is doing by putting all this cleric in the departments, What happens if PAS wins and becomes the full cabinet as well as the Prime Minister? You don't have to worry about them putting any clerics in any department, because the ministers and the prime ministers themselves are clerics. The deputy ministers, most of the heads of many of the departments will be from them. And since they are mostly clerics, they wouldn't even think of putting in JAKIM officers. How do you think these clerics are different than JAKIM officers? These clerics in PAS, who holds the authority or the power of politics and administration in the country, combined with their status as a cleric, will become more difficult for Malaysia to move forward in terms of progressive policies and an understanding of something that will be beneficial to all humanity. So, how do you handle ministers and deputy ministers, all these powerful figures who are clerics in that sense? So for me, in conclusion, I would just like to summarize and say that Islam is here for the next 20 or 30 years at the very least. There is only two choices of Islam, one which is a progressive one by Anwar Ibrahim and the unity government, and the other is a conservative and toxic one by the Perikatan Nasional. If you don't like one of them, then the other will win. It is as simple as that. So what we need to do is to actually understand that we are already in this situation. There is no turning back. They cannot turn back. How do we turn back? Which leader is going to come and turn back and reverse the Muslim, the middle class, the upper middle class back to 1960s, 1970s, P. Ramlee, Tunku Abdul Rahman Islam? It cannot be done. And so we need to content ourselves to this situation and then look at things in a more positive manner rather than in a threatening manner. Now, I'm not in support of any of such policies. For me, it's done, and we need to look at it in a wider perspective. If I think that the decision to put the JAKIM officers as very dangerous and very threatening to Malaysia, I would be the first to say so. But for me, I look upon it as a positive way for these clerics to learn, to better themselves. And if they are better themselves, then and only then the Malays will change. Because the Malays will only change if the clerics change. The Malays are not going to listen to people like Dr. Tajuddin or even an Anwar Ibrahim. They will only listen to clerics. And so it is to our advantage to have a cleric that is learned, that is multidisciplinary, and one day will hold the role as Mufti, who will be all this, and therefore we will have a better Malaysia rather than them only secluded with their own kind, within their own framework, and within their own narrow knowledge. So I think this is something that we should look at in a positive sense rather than listen to voices who doesn't understand reality, who doesn't understand and don't want to understand that Islam is here to stay, like it or not. So that is my commentary on this issue. Thank you.